Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Salma Avdic with the American Marketing Association, and I will be your moderator for today's webcast. This is in partnership with ReadyTalk, entitled Maximize Your Content Pipeline, 5 Ways to Repurpose Webinars. So before we get started, I just wanted to cover some important housekeeping items. This webcast is being recorded and will be made available to you soon. We also invite you all to continue this conversation on Twitter, and you can do so by adding or searching for #ReadyTalk when tweeting about this webcast. And if you have any technical or content-related questions today, please feel free to ask them at any time. You can use the chat box that's located on the left-hand side of your screen. All right, so with that, I'm pleased to introduce our 2 speakers that we have with us today. So we have Justin McAfee, who is the Product Marketing Manager at ReadyTalk. And one of Justin's main priorities in his role is lead generation and customer cross-sell campaigns. In the past, Justin has held roles in promotion and content distribution, and he also has extensive experience driving market share and revenue with digital campaigns. He's also a former TV meteorologist and reporter with 2 Emmy Awards for editorial creativity. Very cool. And we have Elisa Bartash with us, and she's the Product Marketing Manager with ReadyTalk. And she has a passion for creating innovation solutions that helps clients generate leads, increase brand awareness, and ultimately grow their business. And she has spent the past 10 years in the sales and marketing world and has loved every minute of it. So with that, I will turn it over to Justin to get us started.
Thank you so much, Selma, as always, for the warm introduction. And as you might have read in the registration page, that polar bear really photobombed what was a beautiful picture of you.
I know. I can't believe it did that.
Are you still pretty outraged?
I am, and I'm never going back to the St. Louis Zoo.
I'm so sorry to hear that. But at least today we've got something really cool to talk about. We're so happy to be here speaking on behalf of ReadyTalk. Today we're going to speak about maximizing your content pipeline, 5 different ways for you to repurpose your webinar. As marketing folks, we talk all the time about how we can reuse and repurpose and recreate what we've already done and where we can share it and which channels we can try and drive revenue from. And so that's what we're going to do today. And so with that, Elisa, why don't you kick us off with the first of 5?
Sure. So I wanted to start talking about press releases because I feel like this is one area or one piece of content that is often overlooked when it comes to really a lot of types of marketing events. Press releases are really great for any type of event, but especially great for really big, meaningful events, such as product launches or showing off that your company is rebranding or has rebranded. Those are really impactful events that you should definitely consider doing a press release for. And then when you sit down and think about what type of press release you would like to do, think about it in 2 ways. You have a pre-event promotional release that you can do. You can also do one after the event that's more related to thought leadership and extending your thought leadership and expertise in the market. Let's first take a look a little bit deeper into pre-event promotional releases. They're really great for highlighting the purpose of your webinar, really driving excitement around the event and the topic, and it's also a great way to generate leads and get that added exposure before your event. Especially if you have a guest speaker who is someone that is a recognizable figure in your industry, you can really use their clout as a vehicle to generate more interest and potentially also ask them to extend the press release among their network. That really goes a long way with getting, leads, different leads that you would probably not have been able to reach otherwise. Another great thing to do, especially if you're doing a pre-event release, is to make sure that you use strategic media placement, such as in a trade or a trade publication somewhere in the mainstream press, or say, extending it through a company such as PR Newswire.
And we deal a lot of times with folks that might be operating with a relatively small marketing department, and they don't work directly with a PR agency or don't have a really lengthy PR background. Any advice for some of those folks on writing a release?
Yeah. When you think about a press release, it really doesn't have to be a whole thing. A short press release is perfectly fine, and just look for some tips. Maybe do a quick Google search on the proper formatting, the different elements of a press release, and then get a great quote from your thought leader or one of your presenters to include in that press release, and you'll be good to go. Another great thing to do with a press release is to make sure you get it in the news section of your website or adding it somewhere on your website to really extend the life of that press release and to reach more people. It's also a great way to make sure that your company stays relevant, and it's a great way to keep your website up to date. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about doing a post-event press release. Like I mentioned earlier, it's a great way to extend your thought leadership and expertise on the topic of your event. You can highlight key takeaways and encourage anyone reading the press release to watch a recording of the webinar. Definitely make sure you hit on how successful the event was. You don't have to get into the weeds of how many leads you generated, but giving your audience an idea of how extensive your reach was with that event is always a great idea. And then, of course, regardless if you do a pre-event or a post-event promotional release, make sure you highlight the press release on social media. It's a great way to extend your brand awareness and start a conversation with all of your followers.
Definitely. Great way to do it, absolutely. It goes hand in hand with every other part of your marketing channel that surrounds that particular product launch or piece of thought leadership, and that leads us to our next one. Second of 5, blog posts. How do you incorporate blog posts into a webinar? Much like the press release, just think about it 2 ways. You can do a pre-event blog post and you can do post-event blog posts, and then wrap your copy, wrap the body of the blog post around the video. Maybe some of the folks didn't show up to your event because they lost track of time, they didn't have time that day. It's a really great way to show a shorter version of it and reach those people in case they could not be there. So just a quick little background about how you can really maximize your blog posts. Repurposing your webinar by using smaller pieces of content for your blog. So it doesn't necessarily need to be the entirety of the 27 or the 45-minute webinar. You can just do a couple of minutes at a time. ReadyTalk currently does this. We like to cut up little 2-minute snippets of what we talked about and then put it into the blog post and give some exposure to your upcoming event. So we'll tackle first pre-event Q&A and pre-event blog posts that you can generate interest by asking questions. So if you've got some speaker that's going to come on board and speak on behalf of your webinar, they probably have a really great following. They probably have some clout in the industry. Maybe ask them a couple of good, insightful questions before the webinar takes place to generate interest among your followers. What topics are they going to cover? What different marketing philosophies do they hold near and dear, and what do they like to use in their own strategies and different strategies within their playbook? Also, thought leadership on the event topic. It doesn't necessarily need to be directly related to your webinar, but if it fits within the overall marketing promotion at the time, the overall content promotion at the time, make sure you hit things that are relevant for your followers that might end up driving them there. So that goes for sure along with the speakers. Different guest posts, maybe contributing authors that might have a couple of things to add to whatever topic and event that you're about to host through your webinar service. Different topic-related trends, market trends and analysis, research that supports the main body of your webinar content as well. So what are the key takeaways? What might people get out of reading the blog post that they didn't get to see during the webinar, or what they might get to learn when they are listening to the actual webinar? So choose 4 or 5 bullets and then write a paragraph about each or a few paragraphs about each, again, to inspire interest among folks that you're trying to hit with your webinar invitations. And then next to that, we've got the post-event Q&A. Maybe publish a couple of standout questions that really resonated with your audience, if some things were asked that maybe took the webinar in a slightly different direction but inspired a lot of interest and a lot of conversation among the people that were listening, that's huge, and that can definitely create some interesting content and some great background for all of the people that read your blog posts. And then finally, you can also get a great response and great traffic on your blog if you do, as I mentioned a minute ago, add little snippets to it and then surround that with some copy. So if you've got a quick turnaround, so for instance, if you've got a smaller marketing department and you've got a quick turnaround, something that we do, one of the strategies we like to use at ReadyTalk is that a day after a webinar takes place, we will send all of our followers, all of the folks that listened to the webinar, or even the folks that didn't show up for it, links to our blog or links to content related to the webinar. So if you can turn it around quickly, if you have enough time in 24 hours, get the blog post written and upload a 2-minute clip to it, and then drive people there that were not able to attend, or those that did attend, and you just want to keep it fresh on their mind.
Yeah, and Justin, I'm really glad that you're talking about blog posts and how you can, there's so many ways that you can extend the life of your event with blog posts. And, I know as a marketer, and I'm sure you feel the same way, I'm always looking for new ideas and new content for blog articles. And this is a great way to get, 5, 6, 7 different posts out of the one event. So it really not only helps you extend the life of your event, but it also helps, from a bandwidth perspective, because you're essentially getting many different ways and different types of articles that you can post that will, extend your thought leadership and really help you stay relevant.
Definitely.
Because no one wants to have a blog that hasn't been updated in months.
No, exactly. No, positioning yourself as a thought leader as it relates to the webinar that's coming up, or just something that's related based on your field of knowledge and your background, and driving people there is definitely huge.
I think this is a great segue into the next way that you can extend your event. It's the recording. When you start your event, make sure you're recording your webinar. There are so many things that you can do with that recording, and you really don't want to let your webinar fade off into the sunset. So make sure you record it. Add that recording to your content library, whether it's within your blog, if it's on your website, and make sure that recording is gated so that you can generate leads even after your event is over. Now, that brings me to a point that I wanted to make about the number of fields that you ask for when you get your webinar. Just be cognizant that you're not asking for 10 or 12 fields. Based on what Justin and I have done here at ReadyTalk, we've really figured out that 4 to 5 questions max is the limit. If you get any higher than that, people are going to start to turn away and not fill out the form. Even though obviously it's great information, but keep your forms short enough, but of course get the information that you need, and stick with the basics: name, email address, company name, maybe title and industry, if that's information that's important to you.
Absolutely. And we, as I mentioned a minute ago, we send out follow-up emails the day after the event. And it works great with recordings. If, say, you had a long list of people that you blasted the email to, and some of those folks did not open the email, and so they didn't really see the invitation to the event, you're able to host a recorded webinar on different platforms. ReadyTalk offers Simulive. We also offer a platform called Replay. It's called Illuminate Replay, which is a self-managed webinar service. So essentially, you can take any MP4, if it's recorded in the ReadyTalk platform or some other platform, you can put it into the replay solution and then play it back to an audience at any time that you'd like. And you can chat live, you can Q&A. The benefit of doing that is that your head is in the game. You're not thinking about the event logistics. You're not thinking about the technical aspects of the presentation or the stage pressure of being in front of 100 or 1,000 people. Instead, you can focus on the people in your audience and the content and how they respond to it. So if they're asking a bunch of questions about a certain piece of content, it's a great way to qualify leads on the spot. They showed a particular interest in that particular piece of content. make a note of it because they're obviously a little bit more engaged than some of your other folks in the audience. So the recording is huge. The purpose of our webinar today is repurposing content. The recording is big because you can use what you already talked about and promote it once again and try and drive awareness in your follow-up emails to all of the folks after the fact.
Yeah, and Justin, that's a really great point because I feel like a lot of people just assume that when you do a webinar, you have to do it live and then just gate the recording. But the platforms that you talked about, and of course the ReadyTalk Illuminate Replay, are great ways to basically have a second event for anyone who either couldn't attend the first one, or you can do a ton of extra promotion and try to get more people to sign up for basically the second showing. Another great way, or another great thing that you can do with the recording is, of course, sending it out through social media. That will really keep the conversation going and it'll keep the topic relevant. Along the lines of social media, make sure you publish the recording on YouTube. Obviously, that's not gated, but you can put it on there and then send it out to your customer base. You already have their information. You don't need them to fill out a form or anything like that. And you can also share those YouTube links with your sales and account management team to share with their base of customers and prospects to help build relationships with those people and, of course, keep the conversation going. It's also great to show that your company is putting this thought leadership out there. So that's definitely something that you should consider doing.
It is, and especially on the lines of sharing the recording with the account management team and the customer success team. This was brought to our attention. I personally had not been doing this, but here at ReadyTalk, one of our customer success managers had this cool idea of sharing the invitation to upcoming webinars and sharing recordings to previous webinars in her email signature. Pretty creative. You know what I'm talking about. So right underneath, like the Twitter handle and best ways to contact, there's a little link to upcoming webinars. Awesome way to promote events, and we certainly appreciate all kinds of exposure. Different customers that might be interested that we didn't think off the top of our heads. That's certainly a good way to get a little bit more interest that way. Our AEs, our account executives, express a lot of interest in sharing these links with their people, and so we certainly try and provide them as soon as possible. So moving right along, the slides. So what was covered in the event and what you can do with it.
Yeah, so the slides can easily be converted into a PDF, and you can gate those on your website or within your blog. It's a great way to get more exposure and to generate additional leads. Plus, you already put a lot of hard work into creating those slides. Why not really maximize the life of them?
Definitely, and it's really simple. You quickly download the PDF and then you upload it onto your website. And the beauty of it is it depends on who you're trying to reach with this material and this content. But if you're sending a follow-up email with a link to the slides, you don't need to gate it because you already have all the information from everybody on your email list. If you're trying to reach new people that didn't necessarily watch the webinar, definitely put a gate on it. But for the folks that you've already been in touch with via email contact, even if it was a big, massive blast, it's a really good way to keep the content fresh. It gives them a quick link to what was covered, and it's all verbatim. You just take the 5 or 6 or 10 slides that were talked about and throw them right onto your website.
Yeah, and it may also encourage people who download the slides and look at them to actually watch the webinar because they're only getting part of the story by looking at the slides. It's a great part of the story, but they won't get the whole story without hearing your commentary and hearing everything that you're presenting because you're obviously not putting everything that you're saying word for word in those slides. It's giving them a great gist and base of information, but it's a great way to encourage people to watch your recording.
Definitely. That's cool too, especially as we segue into the last one. This is the 5th way to repurpose your webinars that we'll talk about. Comparing a slide share to an eBook is interesting and worth talking about because the slides are what you expect the webinar to cover in its entirety. But inevitably, especially if you have a really engaged audience, a really active audience that are asking you questions, part of the story that kind of gets missing sometimes from the slides is what the speaker answered and addressed based on what the audience was asking. And so you can take a boiled down version of the webinar and really address some of the customer pain points, really address the voice of the customer in a white paper or an ebook. You can take what was learned from poll results and surveys after you've asked the audience their take on X, Y, and Z, and you can create a special ebook about that or a white paper about that, or include it in the overall overarching topic covered in the white paper.
Or make it visual and make a short infographic.
Yeah.
And you know, all of these things are really easy to create after the fact because all of your content already exists. Even if you have to go back and listen to the recording and pick out a few key pieces of information that you feel were really relevant to your target audience, pull those out, put them in a white paper, put them in an email or an ebook, and you know, really repurpose that information. One thing that I love to do is create some sort of Q&A document of all the questions that were asked throughout your event. A lot of times you're not going to have time to answer every single one of them, so encourage everyone to keep an eye out for a Q&A white paper after the event. Create it, send it out to everyone who either attended or didn't attend, and then take the top 2 or 3 question and answer sets that you think are most relevant, copy and paste them into a blog, and then have the CTA of that blog be to download the full question and answer white paper. Something that's quick, easy, really, really easy to do, but also very impactful and very relevant.
Definitely. When you think about, too, the different ways you can direct people across your website, different arrows pointing at different blog posts related to the content you talked about in a webinar, there's, you know, almost unlimited ways that you can drive person A to a different website, or a different part of your website that supports what they're trying to learn about and get educated about. So there's a lot of different ways you can cross-promote within your website based on what was discussed, and that could come from part of the Q&A portion and what was learned, how the speaker answered some of their questions, and then what seemed to generate a lot of interest and engagement based on the bullet points shared and talked about in the webinar itself. Yeah. So definitely a lot of different ways. That was just 5. You know, we went through 5 different ways that you can repurpose webinars. There's certainly many more. Anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I wanted to ask you a question.
No.
Do you think that polar bear actually wanted to eat me?
I did.
Or just photo about me?
It was salivating. If you look closely, you could tell.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm glad that you recovered, though.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm glad I survived.
Okay, good. All right, so Selma, I think we're going to throw it back over to you for now. We'd love to take a couple of questions from the audience, polar bear related or not.
All right, guys. Yeah, we have some great questions, so I'll go ahead and get started. This one is coming from Chris, and the question is, out of all the ways you can repurpose a webinar, what channel typically generates the most leads? That's a great question.
That is a great question, and Justin, I'll go ahead and take that one. Really, the webinar and the recording typically generate the most leads because that's where the strongest promotion is coming from. You're putting everything that you have behind promoting this webinar. You're obviously doing email, social, getting your account management and sales team to send it out to all of their clients and prospects. You're potentially putting it on your website. There are so many ways that you're promoting the event. So it really, you really generate the most leads from that. Make sure you're plugging the actual event. Obviously creates a lot of leads at one time. You have that steady drumbeat up until the hour of your event that you can be generating leads. All the other pieces of content remain active on your website after the event. When you post blog articles about the event, the slides, any white papers or ebooks that you're promoting, they give the presentation more mileage and continue generating leads well after the event, but it really is the event and the recording that are probably going to drive the majority of your leads.
All right, great. Thank you for those suggestions. And this one is coming from Lauren, and the question is, when it comes to playing back a webinar recording, is there a way to host as if the event were still live?
Selma, I can take that for sure. Yes, this is known as a simulated live webinar, and we offer it in two different ways. Either our event services team can play back your webinar recording as if it were live. There's an option to chat during the event to answer audience questions, or you can take the self-serve route and manage the event on your own. So ReadyTalk also offers this with its Illuminate Replay product. This allows you to chat live and engage with your prospects as if the event were taking place live. You can focus on their interests and the content while they're watching rather than thinking about the event logistics. So that goes hand in hand with what we spoke about in terms of recordings, and they go a long way. They maximize your dollar and they maximize your marketing content and get you the most mileage out of your presentation.
Fantastic. Unfortunately, we have run out of time for today, but I want to thank Justin and Alyssa. Thank you so much for your time and offering all of these great tips. And I also want to thank your ReadyTalk team for providing us with our web conferencing platform for today's webcast. If anyone is interested in learning more about ReadyTalk and their services, please feel free to check out readytalk.com/AMA for more information. Last but not least, I want to thank our audience. Thank you so much for your attendance and participation. And as a reminder, this webcast will be available on ama.org/webcast for you to check out and review again and take more notes. We also have a quick post-webcast survey, so please let us know what you thought of today's webcast and also what topics you're interested in seeing presented on future webcasts. So that does end our presentation for today. Thank you so much again to everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.